It's July 2025 and I'm in the marketplace of a West Sussex town that's been built on top of dinosaurs. Located on the edge of the Weald, the area between the North and South Downs, Horsham is a historic market town that was first mentioned in a land charter in 947 relating to the sale of horses, which gives one of the two leading suggestions for its name being derived from Horsham, a settlement where horses were kept. As with so much of southern England, it is of course possible, but it follows the more regular approach of it being named for the area under the control of an Anglo-Saxon warrior, in this case likely called Horsa. Today, the town is the administrative centre for Horsham district of West Sussex, but 1,000 years ago it was considerably less important as, despite it being mentioned in 947, it was completely left out of a Domesday book some 140 years later, falling then into the ancient Norman administrative division of the Hundred of Singlecross within the pre-Norman era Rape of Bamber, the rapes of Sussex being unique to the county, but similar to the ridings of Yorkshire in splitting the county up into, in Sussex's case, 6 regions. But if the human history of settlement only goes back to the mid-10th century, the history of non-human settlement of the area goes back, picking a number at random, at least 64 million years. The town museum and art gallery is home to a collection of finds from the local area, including a set of dinosaur bones discovered in a brickworks quarry in Rudwick 6 miles to the west of Horsham in 1985 that have been dubbed the Horshamasaurus, although in recent years there have been suggestions that it may not be its own unique species. A herbivorous dinosaur that would have been about 5 metres in length, it certainly shows the area has a perhaps more interesting past than its London commuter dormitory town modern facade gives off. The museum covers the whole history of the town from those Cretaceous bones through to the modern day. For a short period after the arrival of the Normans, the town had a castle built by William de Braose in the late 11th century, but abandoned within 100 years. The de Braose family would continue to control the town for centuries. In the Middle Ages, the town had 2 weekly markets, which continue to today, with the Carfax playing host to the Saturday and Thursday markets. Horsham also became noted for its annual fairs. Horsham has a number of dubious lasts in its history. For a number of years, the town was home to Catherine Howard, who would go on to become King Henry VIII's 5th wife and last beheading. In 1735, John Weeks became the last person ever to be pressed to death in Britain. Strapped down between 2 boards, vast amounts of weight were placed on the upper board until the pressure killed him. In 1835, 19-year-old John Spire became either the second to last or last man to be put to death for homosexuality in England. 9 years later, John Lawrence became the last man to be executed by hanging in Horsham, with executions moving to prisons after this date. The same year, 1844, was also the last time that a wife was sold in Britain, with a number of women being sold off for 33 shillings, about £180 in 2025 prices, in the marketplace in the town centre. It was just 4 years later the railways first arrived in the town, first of a single-track branch line from 3 bridges on the main London to Brighton railway line, and then further connections over the next 20 years, with the town becoming an important junction with lines heading south to Shoreham via Steyning and Littlehampton via Arundel, west to Guildford, east towards 3 bridges and on to London, and finally north through Dorking and Leatherhead towards the capital. Both the Guildford and Shoreham lines fell victim to the beaching axe in the mid-1960s. The town had a local iron industry and prosperous brewing industry, but remained mostly a market town serving the many farms in the area until the early 20th century, when the town started to grow rapidly, helped by the local Wealden clay that the town sits upon, turning out to be an excellent material to make bricks with. In 1801, the population of the town had been 1,539. In the following 50 years, it more than tripled to 6,000, and by 1900 had passed the 10,000 mark. Estimates from 2018 put the town's population at more than 50,000 people. The last of the breweries in the town closed down in 2000, and whilst there's still a small amount of farming and small-scale industry, the economy of the town is now focused on financial and professional services and technology, with an even larger number of its townsfolk making the daily journey either into central London or Gatwick Airport, one of the largest employers in West Sussex. The town is home to the headquarters of the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, RSPCA, and the video game studio Creative Assembly, most famous for its Total War series. Until 2015, the town was also home to a major pharmaceutical site as Ciba-Geigy, later merged into Swiss-based Novartis. One of the largest employers in the town was the RSA Insurance Group, formed in 1996 by the merger of Royal Insurance with Horsham-based Sun Alliance. Sun had first come to the town in 1965, becoming the largest employer at one time. The construction of a new office complex for RSA in the late 1990s required the demolition of the inactive St Mark's Church, with just the spire retained in the centre of the complex. Memorial plaques from the various offices of the RSA Group were later transferred to the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire. Sitting between the RSA offices and the town's museum is Carfax, the centre of the town and one of only 3 places in the country to have such a named location, the other 2 being Oxford and Winchester. It's believed that the name Carfax is Norman, a corruption of quatre voies, or carrefour, both meaning 4 ways, a place where 4 roads meet, which before heavy pedestrianisation following the construction of bypasses and ring roads is an accurate description of the area. Leading away from Carfax and the marketplace is the causeway, which the museum is located on, and at the end of that is the parish church of St Mary's. Originally a Norman church was located on the site, and parts of that original building were incorporated into the tower, west door and northwest wall of a new church that was constructed around 1247 to serve the rapidly growing market town. At nearly 800 years old, the church is the oldest existing building in the town and has remained largely unchanged since its consecration in the 13th century, though repairs were required to the steeple in 1615 after it was set on fire following a lightning strike. Whilst the outside of the church has not been altered, the inside has undergone substantial changes since its building, with the various changes taking place due to changing religious practices or fashions, with the interior today dating to works undertaken in the 1860s. 4 miles to the southeast of Carfax, on the edge of the village of Lower Beeding, is Leonardslee. The name Leonardslee derives from the lee or valley of St Leonard's Forest, one of the ancient forests of the High Weald, the land that sits between the chalk ridges of the North and South Downs. The soil of the High Weald is acidic, which makes it poor for agriculture, leaving much of the area wooded well into the 16th century, after which it was discovered that the local sandstone was high in iron, and consequently there was pretty systematic felling of the wood to access the ore to produce cannon, cannonballs, hinges, horseshoes and nails, with this part of Sussex becoming the centre of England's iron industry until the focus shifted to Shropshire with the birth of the Industrial Revolution. Much of the forest was stripped to be turned into charcoal, which was then used in the smelting of the ore into iron. The small streams that ran along the valley floor were dammed to create lakes and ponds to power water wheels that were then used to power bellows that blasted air into the furnace to help increase the temperature. The furnaces would run non-stop day and night, so the need for a constant supply of water led to creation of yet more ponds and dams filling most of the valley bottom, taking advantage of the steep sides of the valley to act as a natural reservoir. During the 16th and 17th century, the valley would possibly have resembled somewhere from the pits of hell, with the fires and smoke from the furnaces illuminating the dark waters 24/7. And then the Industrial Revolution happened, and the dirt, smoke, soot and smells of industry swiftly moved from Sussex to the Iron Bridge Gorge in Shropshire, with the valley falling silent as it couldn't compete with the giant furnaces of the Severn Valley. Nature reclaimed the landscape, but much for human intervention, such as the dams and lakes, remained, and so the valley floor became a picturesque set of lakes at the foot of steep-sided valley walls that were slowly being repopulated by trees. The lands of St Leonard's Forest were granted by King Charles II to his physician Sir Edward Greaves and eventually passed into the Aldridge family. In 1801, the family sold a portion of the estate, including the lakes, to Charles George Beauclerk, who erected a house called St Leonard's Lodge and started work on turning the valley into gardens. Over the 100 or so years that the valley had been left abandoned, it had been reseeded with oak, beech and chestnut trees. To this, Charles introduced more exotic species such as conifers, palms and giant sequoia, as well as camellias, rhododendrons and magnolias that suited the acidic soil. In 1852, the estate was sold to William Hubbard, who had the original lodge pulled down and erected the present Italianate-style house that was completed in 1855. In 1889, Sir Edmund Loder purchased the estate from his in-laws. Clearly, green fingers ran in the family, as his younger brother, Gerald Walter Erskine Loder, later the first Baron Wakehurst, would go on to develop the gardens at Wakehurst Place, 8 miles to the northeast, and now the country gardens of the Royal Botanical Gardens, Kew. Over the following years, further planting took place, including the creation of a rock garden close to the house. In time, the gardens were opened for the public to explore, with the gardens remaining a popular attraction up until 2010, when it was announced the estate had been sold by the Loder family to an international businessman and that it would be closed to the public. That closure lasted 7 years, during which little care or upkeep of the gardens took place. In 2017, the estate was purchased by a hospitality group who set about converting the house into a boutique hotel and started the long process of restoring the gardens to their grandeur by repairing the buildings and paths, including cutting back and removing overgrowth. The gardens reopened for the public in April 2019. The paths around the lakes and up and down the valley sides are now dotted with sculptures and art installations to add an extra layer of discovery into your journey around the site. The gardens are also home to a group of wallabies, who were first introduced by Sir Edmund Loder in 1889. It's believed they are Bennett's wallabies, originally from Tasmania. The wallabies are all that remains of some of the more exotic introductions that Sir Edmund brought to Leonardslee, with at one time gazelle, beavers and kangaroos living alongside the native fallow deer and the earlier introduced sika deer in the wider garden. The mid-19th century house, which sits at the top of a valley overlooking the lake and in the distance the deer park, is now a 10-bed boutique hotel with an attached restaurant and a nearby set of vineyards providing a supply of wine to both businesses. Close to the clock tower building, which has been converted into a visitors' restaurant and cafe, is the Alpine House, a small greenhouse which houses more delicate plants from higher altitudes. And next door is the Dolls House Museum, which houses a number of recreated dolls' houses, as well as an extensive recreation of an Edwardian estate and village built at a 1:12 scale. Up behind the house is that rock garden, originally built around 1890 by the Victorian landscaping company James Pulham & Son. The main structure of a rock garden is made from pulhamite, which, as the name might suggest, is a rock material invented by James and used for rock gardens and grottos across the country without the need to expensively mine and relocate real rock. Pulhamite was designed to look like a gritty sandstone, but the recipe went to the grave of its inventor, so nobody quite knows how it was created. Originally, some of the caves in the rock garden were used to shelter for wallabies before they had their own enclosure. 15 miles to the southwest of the industrial iron furnaces of Leonardslee, you reach the equally industrial chalk pits and lime kilns of Amberley. Starting in the 1840s and continuing for around 120 years, Amberley was another centre of industry in Sussex. this time taking advantage of its position on the chalk ridge of the South Downs as the source of the material it used in the production of lime. The chalk was quarried initially from the edge of the hills and later from mines underneath the hills, and then brought to the kilns on site where it was burnt and turned into lime for mortar, decorating and agricultural use. Initially, lots of small producers worked the site, but in 1876 John Pepper and his son Thomas took over from the smaller producers, and by the turn of the century were the only producers on site and able to work at scale. They took advantage of the site's location next to the Arun River and railway and roads to be able to export out the finished products. The business eventually closed in the 1960s, and the site sat abandoned for a number of years until the 1970s, when a group of architects, surveyors, planners and museum professionals got together. They felt there was a need for a centre somewhere in the southeast of England where industrial and social history could be conserved. The Amberley site came to their attention due to it being pretty much a time capsule of the Victorian period, as little of the lime producing process had changed over the 120 years of the site being in use, and much of the infrastructure still being in place. West Sussex County Council was persuaded to buy the site when it came up for auction to protect the local environment and landscape of the Sussex Downs and to prevent inappropriate development. A trust to promote the museum was formed in 1974 and became the Southern Industrial History Centre. Works on the site to tidy it up and make it safe for visitors took 5 years, and in the spring of 1979 the museum was opened to the public with little more than the chalk pits and lime kilns to see. Over the following years, a number of additional exhibits and museums have been added to the site, including the relocation of historic buildings from across the country to the site, such as rural telephone exchanges and craftsman cottages, with some of the exhibits being noisier than others. One of the other main focuses of the site has been the railways, with a number of industrial narrow gauge railways crisscrossing the site, as well as a standard gauge line that ran from the kilns up an embankment and connected onto the main railway line, enabling the quarry and kilns to ship the finished product directly via rail. There are several exhibits across the site that show both the narrow and standard gauge railways and associated engines, wagons and rolling stock. Since 1984, a narrow gauge railway has been in operation running around the edge of the site. Originally just running along the eastern edge of the site, it was extended in 2007 around the top of the site to provide access to the other on-site museums. Riding on the railway, along with the vintage buses that also travel around the site, is included in the entrance fee. You can watch the raw footage for ride on the railway at normal speed by following the links in the description. But perhaps the most famous bit of track at the site isn't actually in use. In 1985, the chalk pit stood in for the mines of Silicon Valley, and the former works were renamed Mainstrike Mine as they starred in the James Bond film A View to a Kill. Dotted around the site, many of the skip wagons still bear the green livery and Zorin logo that they were decorated in for filming. Along with the railway, the museum is also home to a recreated Southdown Motor Services bus garage from the 1920s. The garage isn't actually any one building, but has been put together from components rescued from many other buildings. Southdown was formed in 1915, providing bus services throughout Sussex and parts of Hampshire, before it was merged into the newly created National Bus Company in 1969 as part of the nationalisation of UK bus services. In 1988, the NBC was split up as it was privatised, and Southdown briefly reappeared before being swallowed up by the ever-expanding Stagecoach Group. There are several other museums, mostly located at the top end of the site, including the BT Connected Earth Telecoms exhibit and the Seaboard, now EDF, Electricity Hall, the latter housing demonstrations of the effects of static electricity, a mains-powered, i.e. 240 volts, Jacob's Ladder,
which is why we got this sort of feathery flame effect. And hot air rises, takes the arc up.
And just for giggles, about 500,000 volts on a high-frequency Tesla coil. Serbian-born Nikola, not South African Elon. Horsham sits on the Arun Valley lines running from London to the West Sussex coast via Crawley and Horsham. Regular southern services run north to London Victoria via Crawley in just under the hour, and south to Bognor Regis, Chichester and Portsmouth. Thameslink operates half-hourly services from Horsham to London Bridge, Farringdon for the Elizabeth line to London Heathrow, London St Pancras for connections to Eurostar, and on to Peterborough or Bedford, taking just over an hour to London Bridge and 80 minutes to St Pancras. Both these services operate via Gatwick Airport, providing a frequent service to London's second airport and its global connections. There are also hourly slow services Monday to Saturday from Horsham to Dorking, Epsom, Sutton and London Victoria, taking 90 minutes.